I need to talk about Daniel Garcia. For those of you who know, I used to talk about Daniel Garcia every week on YouTube and what was going on, what they were doing with him. And now I need to revisit this. I took a break from it because I was like, okay, it's too much Daniel Garcia stuff. But no, they have done this young man so dirty. And this Jericho cast off society, which is what him 2.0 and Hager are now going to be known as. This stuff is so bottom of the barrel rubbish shite. And to see him involved in it and what went down in like the Battle Royal and Battle of the Belts, it is just so depressing. And I know, well, I feel very certain that Garcia himself isn't happy. He just can't be. He can't be, but the hints are there. If you look into it, the hints are there. So Daniel Garcia was brought into AEW as a serious wrestler. He had a very good, like, young technical vibe. You know, he's from the Buffalo area, trained by Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics. And it did feel like when he was brought in that he was, shoved down our throats a bit. It seemed we were always getting Daniel Garcia matches. It's like, who is this kid and why is he always on TV? However, I did really like him. I thought he had promise. Him and Wheeler Yuta. And another guy I'll talk about in a minute, Takeshita, also got this kind of shoved down our throats thing. But yeah, there was something really good about him. He was serious. He has a certain kind of demeanor where he reminds me of guys I used to know, like that kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but like a bit of a hard nut to crack, He definitely reminds me of a certain guy that I knew years ago, during like when I had my first job, who still views my Instagram stories all these years later, but enough about him. So Garcia, serious wrestler, being shoved down our throats. Not in a bad way. But then we get to the JAS stuff. Now, the JAS in itself, in the beginning, the JAS was kind of a good joke, right? The Jericho Appreciation Society. That night when it was formed and when it started, you had people being like, oh my God, the faction's called the JAS, the Jericho Appreciation Society, vomit. But then Jericho got to be like, I'm a heel. Like you're all so stupid. Like, you're meant to feel like that, because I'm a heel, right? I'm meant to be really egotistical. Now, I get that. But honestly, it would be funnier if the reality of it wasn't that Jericho does just trap people in factions and seems to be that egotistical, that the idea of getting into a faction with him is just to appreciate the fact that you get to be near Chris Jericho, because what the heck else do you benefit from it? Like, who honestly benefited from the inner circle? Santana and Ortiz? No. And I think that if you got Santana alone and he was being honest and you were off the record, he'd tell you that he didn't think they benefited from it. Ortiz, I think probably did enjoy himself, but I don't know. I don't know either of them. Jake Hager's benefited in the way that, like, it has given him a paycheck, and I don't know what he would do outside of it. Sammy Guevara, he's been in both factions, Inner Circle and the JS, and he's never progressed. I think his best times were when he walked away from the Inner Circle, but they dragged him back in to be in the JS. He's never been really given the opportunity to progress. When they tried to put him in that 4 Pillars storyline, he was the real weak link, even over Jungle Boy. Like, it really showed. 2.0, like Santana and Ortiz, barely get to do tag team stuff. Barely. It's fine to be a comedy act, but they're not even put there properly in the tag division. I honestly think they could have done something with the Acclaimed when the Acclaimed were champions, but no. Anna Jay, the one time that Jericho is using a woman in a feud, that when he's feuding with Adam Cole and Britt Baker is involved, which was a fucking awful feud and is still my least favorite thing that happened this year, even though the MJF Adam Cole stuff I haven't liked, but there was something really, really off-putting and distasteful about that whole feud that maybe I'll talk about one day. Maybe in that book I was telling you about. When he's doing that, he'd rather team with Saraya than give Anna the spot. He would rather be with Saraya than give Anna a go at getting in there and doing anything with Britt Baker. So when Daniel Garcia is put in the JAS, like initially when they did the formation of the JAS, it was actually done quite good because they made it seem like Daniel Garcia didn't want to be there, and then psych, he did. And I know that everyone I know fucking hated this because they were like, Garcia is a wrestler and he shouldn't be with Jericho. Like that was the opinion of people that I'm friends with, were like, keep him away from Jericho, keep everyone away from him. But for me, like, I gave it a shot. And I was like, no, this will be good for Danny because it will help him come out of his shell. And it did. But it should have ended so long ago. There's bringing a guy out of his shell and there's making him digress so much that he's now an undercard comedy act that if we had on Dark, that if we still had Dark, would be on Dark doing meaningless matches. And so the main like storyline was that the fans were telling Danny, you're a wrestler. They were chanting, you're a wrestler. And Daniel Bryan was going to mentor him. And that whole storyline I thought was really good. But then it just had one of the worst, all-time worst endings that I would love to know the real tea on this. The real tea on what happened with that Dynamite in Toronto. I think it was a Dynamite in Toronto. And, I've said many times that when you're ready, Danny, I would love to do a shoot interview with you. And there's a lot we could talk about off the record too. I won't push you to put everything on the record. But I want to know whose fucking idea this was, that on this Toronto show in Canada, the place where the fans are going to be cheering Chris Jericho, that is when Danny decides that he's not a wrestler and he's going to stay with Jericho. And then that particular crowd cheer that as a babyface thing. Like, that made no sense whatsoever. No sense. And then Sammy Guevara gets taken back in with the JAS. And a joke that I've heard many times is like the role of Daniel Garcia was recast and Sammy Guevara took it. And that seems to be what happened. There, at one point, there was a Ring of Honor, like triple threat match or four-way match. I can't remember. Sammy is placed in it when really Danny would have made more sense in that spot. But they just give it to Sammy, where it's like, will Sammy turn on Jericho? No, of course he fucking won't. I think with Sammy, I don't know why Sammy gets so many chances. And this is not being hateful towards Sammy Guevara. Especially in the beginning, I was a really big fan of Sammy Guevara, and I advocated him for him for a lot when he was in the inner circle, kind of like I do now for Daniel Garcia. But I do think there's certain things that he doesn't have, that he hasn't developed properly, and I think a lot of it is to do with like the kind of babying that he seems to get. And I think that the reason why Sammy gets all these spots is not because of whatever kind of backstage political reason that I've heard some people say to do with Tony. I think it's because Jericho sees Sammy as his personal project. Like, getting Sammy over is a win for him, and he will just keep letting him have goes, keep trying. Danny did, of course, get run with the Pure Championship. He had some great matches with Yuta. That all ended too soon. I think the Pure Champion thing really suited him, but it especially kind of suited him when he was doing the sports entertainer stuff. But really, once Danny made his decision, we just got more months and months of like bullshit and his dancing. Yes, Danny's dance is over, but I think it's the dance that's over rather than him. And I think there is a difference. And I think at some point, something like that becomes a negative, no matter how many cheers it gets. I don't think anyone's seeing Garcia as a wrestler as much as they're seeing him as just a dancer, a guy that does a funny dance. I don't really think that's sustainable. And when it comes to comedy stuff, you can, grow out of that and progress into a more serious wrestler. Someone that knows Danny, named Chris Jericho, was very comedy oriented in his time in WCW when I first started watching him. But I think what made what he was doing there more acceptable, because he did some silly stuff, was that at least he was like the main star of a division, like the cruiserweights. He was the one getting all the mic time and all that stuff. And he became a TV champion as well. So he didn't come across as like lower card. He came across as upper mid card. And he was able to speak, like advocate for himself. He was entertaining and he was funny, but he was such a good talker that he was more than just his like funny little tantrums. Garcia's just sent out to dance, and that's it. I think the gear is so bad. Garcia and Daddy Magic and Cool Hand Angelo are all wearing the cast-off pants of a 50-year-old man. And boy, do they not suit Daniel Garcia. I think that wrestling's not good at modernizing, especially modernizing people's looks. And Garcia and Hook are two guys that are very young and modern looking. And I have seen Garcia in real life when I was in Las Vegas, and he doesn't dress like an old rocker. No surprise. And I wish he was able to dress more like himself on TV, because it looks bad. And I'm not saying that having an 80s metal look is bad, because you can go look at my Instagram and see that I dress like that 50% of the time. But it's authentic to me, and it's not authentic to Daniel Garcia. And the pants just look bad on him. Like they just look like cheap and they don't suit him. And where we kind of at now is we got another freaking JS dissension story where these people wake up to Jericho. They wake up and they realize that he's using them. Remember the time that Santana and Ortiz woke up to him and were like, we'd be better off without you. We can do something without you. And then like they actually didn't really win anything. And it basically turned out Jericho was right and they needed him. Well, this whole JS story, Sammy gets to be the one who leaves, because Danny's still the one that's trying to be kind to him. Sammy gets to be the one who leaves. Not that I'd want Danny in that Don Callis faction, but anyway. Jericho gets to go, like, just discard the other members, go off. Like, Jericho's too good for Danny and 2.0 and Hager. That's what we're seeing from his actions. So they all just get to be jobbers. So who's benefited so far? Of course, Jericho. Maybe Sammy. At least he got to do something different. He's joined another group. He's not walking around in Jericho's old pants begging for him. And then aside, from this, we have Sammy's in Dawn's faction. But remember when Dawn turned on Kenny and the nuclear heat he was getting with Takeshita? And that was great. And the Dawn and Kenny have so much history, but then around this time, Jericho was like, hey, I really want to work Ospreay at Wembley. How can we get to that? I know we'll spend weeks telling everyone my rich history with Don Callis and just muddy everything that's happening between Kenny and Callis and Takeshita. So now Takeshita is basically doing nothing. He just stands there behind Don. and Sammy and Osprey. Like Wrestle Dream, we all come out together. Like Osprey's coming out at the same time as Sammy Guevara, like they're equal. And when it came to doing the match at Wrestle Dream, is Chris gonna, take Danny to be his partner against the Callis family? No. No, because he wants in on that Golden Lovers action. So he'll team with Kenny and Ibushi. Yeah. So currently Daddy Magic is mad at Danny for dancing. I heard the What Culture guys talk about this. Like, why? Why is Daddy Magic mad at Danny for dancing? He wants him to focus. Why does he want him to be the only person with like a loud idiot character? It's not as if Daddy Magic is the serious guy. So now the fans are chanting at Danny, let him dance. So Danny dancing is the babyface thing. Yay. Can't wait till he's allowed to freely dance again. I think whatever happens in this, I'm sure that Danny has been told that there's great things coming for him or whatever. Whatever happens between him and his former faction leader, all of that. I think we're past the point where we can like make up for all of this that's happened. Sorry, I moved in my chair again. I think we really are. And it's just like sad. I think AEW has a really big problem with elevating people. They don't properly elevate people, especially young guys, but getting them trapped in a faction like this is just not working. And I don't think these factions benefit people, really. I think that one day down the line, we're going to have a large conversation about some people involved in this, but it ain't going to happen today. So yeah, I just continue to think that Daniel Garcia has been used really badly. Beno did a great tweet about it the other day, and he ended by saying you couldn't have written him a worse year. And I think that's true. And maybe Daniel Garcia himself actually liked these tweets. So, but I hope better things are to come for him. I think he is a guy that could benefit from a change of scenery, though, because it will take a lot for the fans not to see him as the dancing guy anymore.